Welcome to Podcasting Power Hour with your host, Jeff Townsend, aka the Indie Podcast Father. I'm your co-host, Greg, from Indie Drop-In Network. Podcasting Power Hour is recorded live every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitter Spaces. Every week, an experienced panel of podcasters and other experts will tackle your podcasting questions. We will, of course, put links to all of our guests and any relevant information in the show notes. All right, let's get this party started.
Welcome to Podcasting Power Hour. I can't believe it's August already. Let's bring the heat. I am Jeff Townsend, the host of this space, and of course, COVID-19 positive. I feel like shit. I'll describe to you how I feel. You know how when you step in dog shit and wet grass, it's like a terrible feeling? That's how I feel right now. But we are still going to keep it together here and do this. Of course, helping me is old Greg from Indie Den, and he has a million other podcasts. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's nice to hear you're positive about something because lately you've been very negative.
Wow. Okay. And also helping out the most hated man in podcasting, Tanny Campbell.
God, please start calling me Tanny. I would love that. Hey, Jeff, I'm sorry you're not feeling good, man.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just glad to be here. Of course, Jim Mallard also is with us. He's been podcasting for the Mallard Report for about 11 years. I was lucky enough to be on the podcast last week. I'm sure there were millions of downloads, Jim.
Well, the podcast hasn't came out yet, but when it does, I'll be sure to tell you. And your description also sounds like how you look, so it's all good.
Oh my God.
Dang.
Why are we all so fucking salty on Mondays? We should do this on Thursdays when we're all tired.
Well, normally, Tanner, Jeff is all over you, so it's our chance to get to him when he's weak.
That's right. He's limping. Get him.
Jen from J Vision Advertising and Marketing. She deals with some pretty decent high-level clients. She's going to take the time and join us tonight. I know she likes talking marketing and advertising. So thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
And of course, last but certainly not least, he's the Hall of Famer. The ladies call him DJ, but I call him Uncle Dave Jackson. Thanks for joining us, man.
Is it like bring your own nickname night or something? Uncle Dave. I do like Tanny. That's got a nice ring to it, but happy to be here.
Just be happy it wasn't Deej.
Deej.
Do the ladies actually call you DJ, though? Now I must know.
I am a guy that literally has had I could bore us to death. I've had 8 million nicknames. DJ was in there, as well as JD, Vedward, you name it. People have called me many very strange things.
Wait, did you have a lot of dyslexic friends? Why was JD in there?
JD, I got hired at a place that had 4 other Daves. So we already had like Dave, Davey, and David. And they're like, crap. And we hired another Dave. And they're like, do you have any nicknames? And I go, my last job, they called me Jam and Dave. They go, that's too long. You're JD. And I was like, okay. So that's kind of how it,
my brother used to knowing that now.
Well, he was right. He bored us to death.
I did.
Yeah. Dave, I'm asleep already. Dang it.
He recalls his first day at Libsyn.
That's it.
Anyways, the man of the hour is going to help us tonight and talk some marketing. The podcast marketing guy, Jason Falls. Thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've tried to come in on a couple other calls, and Monday nights are just terrible for me. So this is actually my first Power Hour. It will not be my last, I'm sure.
You're busy watching wrestling, right? During this time?
Yeah. Wrestling and cockfighting, man. That's the big thing here.
You got your sipping whiskey with you?
Actually, I do. I topped off. I'm going a little old school here. A little tailgate party. I've topped off my very large stadium cup of diet soda with a little Knob Creek. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Wow. All right. In the meantime, if you have anything you want to discuss or questions, go ahead and request to speak. We'll go ahead and get things going with Jason. It's by no means an interview, but we will give you a little bit of time to talk about what you're doing and how long you've been doing it.
Well, sure. And thanks for that opportunity. So I have been in the digital social media space for 20 years or so. I'm a PR guy by trade. I was working at an ad agency in 2005 and happened to know blogging and social networking sites just because I played on them, for fun, and had clients clamoring and saying, well, we want you to do that for us. And so I kind of walked into a second phase of my career. Currently, an influence marketing strategist and consultant. I work primarily with an advertising agency in Lexington, Kentucky called Cornet, but I've expanded that consulting business, and now I'm working with other people too. Part of what I do with my influence marketing work is I have a podcast called Winfluence, the Influence Marketing Podcast, which is a spinoff and companion to a book that I wrote about the topic. I have a slightly different take on influence marketing, which is probably less important for the conversation here. But in the pursuit of marketing that podcast and trying to find networks where I could get cross promotions and maybe find ways to monetize my podcast, my own little journey. I got really frustrated that I was on an ad network that I never saw any revenue from, nor did I ever see any cross promotions. And so I just got mad one day and started my own and called it the Marketing Podcast Network, because I knew, hey, I know a bunch of people in the marketing space that have podcasts. Maybe I could talk them into joining me and we could kind of combine forces here. And what dawned on me while I was doing that was, if I can turn to an advertiser and say, I can guarantee you that 100% on this network are marketers, because that's all we do, are marketing podcasts, that's a pretty good sales pitch. And I can probably sell some ads that way. And so I started the Marketing Podcast Network in November. We're almost a year old. We've got about 32 shows now. 29 of them are on the ad network. And then we've got 3 that have opted to just be sort of thought leadership podcasts that pay a membership fee to be a part of the network. If you're on the ad network, you don't pay a membership fee at all. And we split our revenue. We automatically cross promote each other with shows. And then we have a monthly creators call and a Slack community where we support one another in our growth, our technology questions, all that good stuff. So that's what I'm up to.
Well, now hold on a second, Jason, because I don't want to let you off the hook here. You came in talking smack, but you and I have a lot of things in common. One of those things is that we used to have an aggressively titled show, in your case, a book, and we decided, we probably shouldn't be that aggressive. You want to tell that story?
And you both have pretty cool beards too.
Oh, his is way better.
Yeah. Mine is way better, but that's okay. Timmy, he needs a few more years to have some length and some gray. He'll get it. It's no big deal. Yeah. So my first book that I wrote in 2011 with my friend and co-author Eric Deckers was called No Bullshit Social Media. And the point of that book was, at that point in time, very early on in the brands using social media space, you still had a lot of people saying it's all about joining the conversation and it's holding hands around the campfire and singing Kumbaya. And I was working at an ad agency. I couldn't do that with my clients. I had to talk to them about how social media marketing could lead to, customer acquisition, growth, things like that. So Eric and I sat down and decided we were going to write a book about social media strategy. And I really wanted it to be kind of in your face, because that's kind of my personality. And we pitched it to the publisher, and they said, if Barnes & Noble says it's okay with us. And Barnes & Noble loved it. And it, sold modestly well for a business book. And then this last book that I wrote, Winfluence, Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Brand, is the official title of it. I really wanted to, the voice inside my head, the devil on one shoulder was saying, you've got to be controversial. You've got to put a title on this book that's going to match or trump No Bullshit Social Media. And of course, the book is all about influence marketing without the R. And that's kind of my take on influence marketing, is it's more than just social media celebrity influencer types. And so working title for the book as I wrote it was Fuck the Kardashians. But cooler heads prevailed, mine mostly, during the process. And I thought, nobody's really going to take me seriously if that's the title of the book. So we opted for something a little bit more business friendly.
What did Barnes & Noble say to that one?
We didn't even pitch it to him. I made the decision to pull that title before we ever got to the point of trying to promote it to anyone. I said, nah, I'm a little older. I'm a little wiser. I know that that's going to turn a lot of people off. So I backed off of it.
I would buy 2 copies of that book.
Well, my whole goal, I told Tanner this a couple weeks ago. We had tacos and burritos together in Denver, and I told him that my whole goal with that title was to get Kanye to tweet "fuck Jason Falls," and I thought if I do that, I can retire. I'm done. That's all I need to do.
If only you'd known that NFTs were going to be a thing, you could have minted that. You'd be a millionaire by now.
Exactly.
I was going to say, if you could have got it shrink wrapped in a black bound book, so nobody would have had to buy it to see it was on the inside, you could have probably sold a couple million copies of it.
That's true. I could have. That would have been great.
If anybody listening has any questions or something they want to discuss, feel free and request the mic. We'll let Greg and Tanner kick it off as I'm quickly losing my voice here. I got the vid.
Why don't we let Jen's got her hand up? Why don't we let Jen ask?
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, hi. Sorry. Well, Jason, I do have like a million questions for you. But first of all, we're like colleagues. We have a similar history, which is really amazing because every time that I see everyone talking about advertising and the way that, well, not just advertising, but the digital marketing aspect as well, the way that you are, it kind of inspires me to do the same thing because I've always wanted to do like something different into this industry, right? But one thing that caught my attention that you said about the influencer marketing is like I've seen your work, what you have been doing, and the difference that you're trying to make in the industry. But the main question would be, do you consider yourself an influencer?
Oh, wow. I mean, within a certain sphere, sure. And this dates back to, I started my original sort of foray into the space was I started a blog called Social Media Explorer, which, I did a pretty nice job of growing that audience for a few years. And I started to have software companies in the social technology space reach out to me and say, hey, we'd like to partner with you. Can you do a webinar with us? Can we sponsor a blog post? And so, in the 2010, 2011 range, I was getting offers from brands to leverage my. So within that social technology, social listening, influencer marketing software space, I definitely consider myself an influencer. And I think that really helps me bring interesting perspectives and strategies to clients because I see the industry from a lot of different sides. I've been at a brand, I've been at an agency, I've been a content creator slash influencer as well. Probably the only facet of the influence marketing sphere I've not had firsthand experience being a part of on a day-to-day basis is working at one of the software companies. But my whole job as an influencer is to review and use all these softwares so that I can talk intelligently about them. So I do consider myself an influencer, but I don't have an ego about it because I realize that as my friend Chris Brogan used to say, nobody at Walmart knows who I am. So I don't think of myself as important. I just think there are a certain number of people who listen to what I have to say.
Would you think if people at Walmart knew your name that you were important, Jason?
Well, no, that was
that the
Chris's
barometer?
Point. No, that was Chris's point because I can assure you, if I walk into the Walmart in Pikeville, Kentucky, half the people there know who I am. And that's not impressive.
Well, you touched on something there that I think everybody in the room maybe has some misgivings about. I know that I do. I'm from New England, born and raised in Concord, New Hampshire, a little town called Sugar Hill, and I've got some of that Protestant ethic or Protestant morality beaten into me over the years. And there's something about calling yourself an influencer that is just, it makes me uncomfortable. Jeff teases me about it all the time. And I think that most people, when they hear it, if they aren't, if they're not saying it about themselves, they hear someone else say it about themselves. It doesn't, what's the deal with that in your estimation? I mean, you've been in this for a long time.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I've said this before. I got into this was again years ago. I got into an argument with Doug Carr, who's a real good MarTech blogger and expert. And I call him an expert, because he is. But he called himself an expert back then, just like people those influencers now. And I got into an argument with him, actually, I think on his podcast a long time ago. And I said, you can't call yourself an expert, man. That's like saying you're good in bed. You don't know if you're good in bed. That's for other people to judge. If someone calls you an expert, then in your mind, you are an expert, and you thank them for the compliment and move on. But you saying you are one, or you saying you are an influencer, I think is kind of makes you a douchebag. And I don't know. I've always kind of shied away from that. The way that I've phrased it to other people is I have a certain amount of expertise. I have a certain sphere of people that I might influence, but the title is something other people have to give you.
Well, so how do you, because there's a juxtaposition there, right? You talk about influencer marketing with people whom maybe you are trying to convince to become influencers. So when they feel uncomfortable about it, how do you get over that hump? Because I imagine that might be a little bit of an awkward conversation, especially the more stoic or reserved the person is about that sort of thing.
Well, the good fortune that I have in working with, creators is kind of the new phrase we're trying to use to identify them, is that almost every single one of them has a disproportionately large ego. And so they are going to call themselves an influencer, and they are going to, put on the pomp and circumstance that, they have hundreds of thousands of minions just waiting for their every, post or word or picture or reel or whatever. So I don't have to deal with the humility a whole lot on this side of the aisle, unfortunately. But at the same time, I have had some, what I would consider either micro influencers or some people who are thought leaders within like B2B industries that they don't have big Instagram accounts. They don't have a huge following on Twitter. And I say, hey, I'd like to partner with you on this. And I have a budget. I'd love to pay you to collaborate with this client of mine to create content. And they look at me, or they act like, what are you talking about? Like, this is not something I do. And then I just illustrate the point. You have an impact on the audience that my client is trying to reach. Let me help you monetize, at least in this one instance. But then I can also, just because I'm a nice guy and I like to see people succeed, I can also give you some tips on how you could better position yourself and your personal brand to do this more so that you can have a nice little side hustle. And so, typically they love that.
So you recognize them as influential in their space, whatever it is. It's just when they say it about themselves, that's the thing that's.
Yeah. I mean, if someone introduces themselves to you as an influencer, proceed with caution.
I actually noticed earlier this week that anybody who has what kind of profile do I have, Jason? A creator profile, I guess, or a business profile here on Twitter?
Yes.
It gives you like a category of things you can select from, and influencer is now one of the selections. And I thought that was odd.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the social networks, sort of pandering to that crowd because, whether it's Twitter or, Instagram, Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call that conglomeration, TikTok, they're all trying to, bring those content creators in because those content creators help make their sites stick. But unfortunately, it's a little bit of a trap because they're trying to bring all those content creators in and have them identify themselves as quote unquote influencers so that they can lay all sorts of, fees and limit access to that person with brands by doing the, brand collaborations officially and whatnot. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag right now on how the social networks are identifying these people, because I think there's some risk there for the content creator to dive too deeply into that. But at the same time, we're in the wild, wild west here. And so the social networks are going to always try to figure out how they can monetize anything to feed their shareholders what they want to see. And to date, content creators / influencers who are, getting brand deals and making money outside of those platforms, well, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't get his cut of that. And so I think they're doing more and more things to tighten the screws and make it harder for brands to partner with collaborators without officially going through the social networks.
There's always a bigger fish trying to get theirs.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg. I thought you just said no in the back channel. My bad.
I was saying no to Jeff, not to you, Tanny. So I wanted to kind of roll this back to podcasting a little bit and just remind everybody down in the audience that if you have a question for Jason or for anyone up here in the panel, feel free to request to speak. But Jason, I heard some angst in your kind of description of how you monetized your original podcast. You know, you were on a network and didn't get any money and had to kind of do it yourself. Can you walk us through the other side of the equation of actually acquiring listeners? Did you find that easy, hard? What was your strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's hard for me to judge whether or not it was easy or hard because I always had a very realistic view of where I sit in the space. My podcast is not about marketing. My podcast is not about social media marketing. My podcast is about influencer marketing. And I kind of prescribe that it's, not about the content creator so much as it is the brand or the agency that's trying to figure out how to do this. So that is so very niche and so very limiting to how big the audience really is. So I never really sort of judged whether or not this was easy or hard. I knew it was going to be a tough row to hoe. But because of my background in marketing and my background certainly in organic and social media content, I knew that I was going to publish every episode on my blog. I knew that I was going to promote it on certainly Twitter, where I probably have my biggest audience, although Twitter is a little different than it was when I built that audience. I was going to promote it certainly on Facebook. I was going to promote it on LinkedIn was my primary place because that's where, businesses talk to other businesses. So that was a better place for me to promote it. I did experiment with some, short, runs at podcast advertising and things like that when I was first getting started. But the primary, mechanism for me to promote my podcast was the same mechanism I used to promote my book, which was I pitched the hell out of myself to be guests on other podcasts. And I probably got the first 500 or so regular listeners / downloads per month or week or whatever by simply just going to be a guest on all my friends' shows and talking about the concept of Winfluence and talking about the book. And so it really is getting yourself out there in front of people who already listen to podcasts.
It sounds like your niche, though, is the enabler of that, right? Because you have something very specific to pitch to other podcasts to talk about.
Yeah, it is. And it's really interesting because I have pitched myself to some podcasters and in the pitch or in the conversation about what we'll talk about or whatnot, they have a realization that one of the reasons that I'm pitching them is because they are an influencer and I want to reach their audience. So I'm using influence marketing to just grow my podcast. And it's been surprising to me how many podcasters I've talked to about this over the last couple of years who never in a million years would have put themselves into the category of an influencer or quote unquote influential. And I'm like, dude, you've got a captivated audience that listens to you on a regular basis. You're a better influencer than most people on Instagram because people literally hang on your every word and listen to what you say. And so you're right. It is a little bit of a weird kind of dichotomy and contradiction in how either I achieved what I did with growing my podcast, but it was really just kind of implementing the strategies that I had put in the book and was working with clients around.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we have a new speaker request, the Bromingos podcast.
Awesome.
Yes. Speak up. Ask your question. We're here for you.
Good evening, everybody. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah. You sound great.
Okay, great. First of all, Jeff, good to see you, buddy. Hope you feel better from COVID. Second of all, thank you guys for allowing me to speak. Third, so I have two podcasts. One of them, of course, is the Bromigos podcast, which I do with a few other guys. 69 Whiskey, my other podcast, is a very different show entirely. The content is different. I'm trying to find different but similar ways to market the two of them just to see if I can streamline it a little bit better. Right now, I don't know if I'd say I'm in a bit of a trap of marketing when it comes to maybe say specifically Twitter and Instagram. I kind of try and market them the same, but like technically, well, how I do it is I use a lot of hashtags within my actual caption just to push it out there because I figured the more hashtags you have, or at least relevant hashtags, it kind of helps you. In addition to that, for instance, the podcast account I'm on right now, Bromigos, every time we have a new episode, during the recordings that we do, I post a behind the scenes clip, so to speak, of a soundbite that's going to end up on the episode, but kind of gives you a behind the scenes look of what it kind of looks like as we talk. So I'm not sure, like, because I've done different things from like creating quote unquote thumbnails to put in the tweet as like an idea of what the episode's going to be about, along with some directories where you can find the show. I've done the behind the scenes clips. I'm trying to do different things. I'm just curious to know maybe what I can do better in this sense, because it is two different shows and it's two different ways of marketing. I guess for condensing the question, I guess we'll just refer to this account that I'm on. Is that hopefully is that easy for
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
understand, or am I
So,
speaking?
Jason, do you want to tackle it, and then maybe we get Jen's perspective too?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in and just kind of as a follow on to what I was, sort of talking about earlier. I think one thing that you didn't mention that I hope you're either doing or you will soon do is, pitch yourself to be a guest on other podcasts. Work your work, and obviously you want to pitch yourself or you want to be a guest on podcasts that have similar audiences and or similar subject matter. And I know that, for Bromigos, it looks like it's more just, some friends sitting around chatting. Well, hell, there's, 1,000 of those out there. So it's about making those connections and saying, hey, if my audience would really like your podcast and your audience would really like my podcast, maybe we, trade that kind of out. One of the things that I try to encourage the podcasters on the Marketing Podcast Network to do is, try to be a guest on everybody else's show, because that just expands the reach of who you are, which can grow your listenership. But I've also been encouraging them to do feed drops and say, hey, I really want you to get to know this other show on the Marketing Podcast Network. I did that not too long ago with Sarah Panus is one of our marketers, one of our podcasters, and she does a show called Marketing with Empathy. And I just really like her perspective. It's not my perspective. It's not the kind of topic that I would necessarily tackle, but she did an episode that was relevant to influencer marketing. So I, basically just, sent her a message and said, hey, I'm going to steal your show and drop it in my feed to promote you. And I did that. So I would encourage you to do those two things. Think about, being a guest on somebody else's podcast. And then when you get a really good relationship with some folks, maybe suggest a feed drop swap and promote yourself that way.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. On my other account, we've done that quite a bit. We're definitely going to try and do that more. It's just, schedules and, everything kind of goes into, trying to get us together to make that sort of thing happen. Otherwise, I would just be by myself, and I can try and be as entertaining as I can, but I always like to have another member of either of my shows, join me, obviously.
Sure.
So I definitely see where you're coming from on that. I definitely am trying to utilize that more. It's just, like I said, scheduling. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I have quite a few friends who I've met over the last year or so of me podcasting in general. We've been on their shows, and there was a time where we were doing so many shows, and even when one of my other podcasts took a break, I was basically what I like to call whoring myself out to be on other people's shows, just to keep myself busy and also promote that show while it was on break. So it's definitely something that works, because we still saw numbers from it. So yeah, I do appreciate that feedback.
Jen, do you have a perspective on this? Sorry, Jason.
Well, yes, I actually do agree with Jason in the part that you need to do some collaborations and actually participate in different type of networking events, like related to your niche. But there's one thing that you mentioned that you feel like kind of on a trap when it comes to the marketing strategy that you're using, because it's two different podcasts, and I get it's different strategies. Or there's one thing that a lot of people keep forgetting, and it's that advertising is a long-term commitment, like especially when it comes to brand awareness, and it's something that down the road is going to be working, right? So you need to continue making it, basically to track that strategy that is working, what is not working, fixing it, but never stopping it, because a lot of people make the mistake to stop it before its journey ends, and that's when it hurts the most. And it may feel like you're not getting any out of it, but maybe it's because the length has not yet occurred, and basically it's not what it's supposed to be. But when you reach that momentum that you keep doing the same thing, that you like feeling that you did everything, especially that you keep working on it, is when you're gonna see that result. So do not give up on it. Just making sure that you are adding that strategy that you need, and making sure that the strategy that you're using is actually working, that you're seeing some results, or somehow that you're moving forward to it.
So, Jason, Jen, question for both of you. I'm gonna start with a little bit of a story. Tell a story. Sorry, I'm a storyteller. When I was in my late 20s, I took my first job as a marketing director at a dentist office called Spodak Dental. It's not exactly your normal dental office. If you look up Spodak Dental, your jaw will probably drop. It's looks like it belongs in LA. It doesn't look like it belongs in Delray Beach, Florida. And there was a lot of effort around this marketing campaign, which was the branding and the marketing of our mascot, which was a tooth. And we would dress this tooth up in all kinds of different things, like hats. You'd have a surfboard, depending on what kind, if it was Cancer Awareness Month or something. There was always some kind of campaign that was going out to promote the dental office with the tooth. And I remember that I felt for the entire time that I worked there that my job was very ridiculous. It really just circled around making a tooth look funnier every time the tooth appeared anywhere on social media. But it took up a lot of my time. And all it was a stupid tooth for a dentist office. And so when host of the Bromigos here came up to stage and asked that question, he says, I'm trying to market 2 podcasts. I know how much marketing can go into a single podcast. How reasonable is it? And you just said this, Jen, how much effort, it's an ongoing effort, advertising and marketing. How reasonable is it for an independent podcaster with no team other than perhaps a co-host to believe that they can do a good job marketing and advertising 2 separate shows, 3 separate shows, 4 separate shows? How can they expect to be successful at that? And do either of you have any tips on how they can be?
Jen, you want to start?
I mean, you can go ahead. No worries.
Okay. So it's an interesting question. And for the, as you framed it, for the independent podcaster who doesn't have a lot of help, it's an uphill battle, that's for sure. The 2 things that kind of popped into my mind there are, you obviously, if you don't have a lot of capital to invest in paid advertising, it's that, grind it out, slow burn of networking, being a guest on podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And you only have so many hours in a day. So I think what you have to do is just prioritize your time, prioritize the time every day or every week you're going to spend on each show. And then, go where, fish where the fish are. If you see traction with one show, not to necessarily pull yourself away from the other, but when you start to see traction, pour gas on that fire. Ride that wave as long as it will go to get you closer to your goal or closer to a critical mass of listeners or revenue or whatever. And then try to make time to go back and revisit and keep plugging away at the other show. I think there has to be a line in the sand that you draw from a realism perspective to say, I only have so many hours in a day. I'm probably not monetizing any of these podcasts to the point to where they're paying my salary, my bills, etc. So I have to pay attention to my day job. I have to pay attention to my family, all that kind of stuff. You're going to have to prioritize it, but it really is prioritizing your time and dedicating. Maybe it's an hour a day, maybe it's a couple hours a week, whatever it is, dedicating the time to doing it, and just be really repetitive and focused on toiling away at it. Eventually you'll get to a point to where you'll either see the success you want to see, or you'll realize this isn't going anywhere and I need to cut that, cord and move on to something else that I can focus on.
What do you think, Jen?
Well, just to add something in there, definitely you need to prioritize, but something that I always tell my clients, the first thing you need to do is that research to make sure that you know where your audience is, what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. If you don't know that part, you still don't know where your strategy is going to go. Even your business or your podcast, you don't know what is going to happen with it until you're like 100% sure that this is what you want to go, or this is the route. And just like Jason said, you need to know which one you want to go first, because that's the one that you actually enjoy the most, first of all, and it's giving you the more results to it. Once you start with that channel, it's like when you have like a multiple pages on social media. You don't know which one to go, because at the same time, it's a lot of work. A lot of people don't say it, and you're supposed to be in every single social media, but it's a lot of work and you're not going to have all the time to do it and to work on it. But once you see where your audience is, where you're getting more results, then eventually from that one, the other pages are actually going to grow. So the same thing is going to happen even with the different podcasts that you're going to have. You're going to be promoting it between each other, especially when you are on it in the one that you like the most. It's like the best strategy that you can actually add to it.
And I'll add to that real quickly. I actually did this not too long ago. I was doing, two shows. One was Digging Deeper, which was really a marketing creative interview show for Cornet, the agency where I am. It was a live stream show, so there was a lot more work that went into it because Winfluence, the other podcast I do, is really audio only. But it was a live stream show that we did, streamed on a bunch of different networks. It was weekly. Took a lot of my time, took a lot of planning, took a lot of energy and effort to make that thing come to life. I streamlined my process and got it into a window of time every week that I could afford to give to it. And it was for the agency. The goal was new business. We were trying to attract people to pay more attention to Cornet and get some guests on that maybe we could start relationships with. And it was modestly successful. We were able to get a lot of brands' attention because of that show. But after a while, it just got to be, it got to be work. And Christy Heiler, the owner and president of Cornet, my boss, and I sat down one day. We're just having a conversation about it. And we both agreed, let's put it on hiatus. Let's give it a month or two. And if we really feel the desire to get back at it, we will. If not, it's okay if we don't do another episode. So it's still on this like extended hiatus, and that free time that has been opened up because I'm not committing the time to Digging Deeper anymore. I've been able to pour into kind of a side project podcast for her called Agency Owners in the Advertising Space. And that podcast is starting to take off. It's an audio only podcast as well. But we're seeing a lot more success more rapidly with that than we did with Digging Deeper. So I like the decision we made to kind of prioritize our time there.
So I know that Greg has a question. Greg, I'm sorry for jumping in before you ask yours, but I know it's going to take us away from what we're already talking about. Jason, Jen, first of all, I want to say that I'm a lazy shit. Like I do paid marketing because I just can't. I can't handle the time involved in doing like traditional organic marketing. It takes fucking years to have it work really well for you. And I'm not great at it. So I really admire the skill set that the two of you have. You're talking about getting to know your audience. We have a couple of ways of doing that, right? We can see who's engaging with us on social. We can see on what social platforms they're engaging the most with. We can do things like put out listener surveys, but the call to action response, or the conversion rather, on a listener survey might be so low that the data is not really that useful to us. We have podcast prefixes or prepends that we can add in our hosting so that we can get some kind of demographic data. For example, Chartable has something like that. PodTrack has something like that. I'm trying a new startup called Podder that you can find at podderapp.com. I talk about it in tomorrow's episode, actually, that seems to be using census data and mapping that data to like the zip code of the person who's listening to your podcast to try to make some guesses about, kind of like how they measure billboard ads. Do you guys have any other tools that the podcast using affordable tools or methods to find out who the hell is listening to us? Because I feel like it's a little bit more unique than a blog, a little bit more unique than a closed system creator on like Instagram or TikTok. Like, what can we do to get a better sense of who the hell is listening to us? Are there some analytic apps out there that we don't know about?
I say this half in jest and half seriously. I'm waiting on Tom Webster to invent one. But I think he's in the room. So Tom, get to work. But I really and truly know my audience well, just simply because when someone says they listen, or when someone says, hey, I heard your episode on XYZ, I'll stop and ask them 5 or 6 questions. I literally I find actual listeners and I say, hey, how often do you listen? Where I literally
You're like the guy outside the supermarket with the
yeah, absolutely. I'll just quiz them and get some real direct feedback from them, because I know it's very difficult for me to get that kind of qualitative data anywhere else. Quantitative data that I get isn't really all that good because I don't have 100,000 downloads every episode, so I'm not going to get that kind of data for the size show that I have. So until, of course, Tom Webster invents something to solve that problem, which I know he will, or be a part of something that does. I'm just going to keep talking to my audience.
Podcasting Power Hour is part of Indie Drop-In Network. If you are a podcaster looking to grow your listeners, check out IndieDropIn.com. Indie Drop-In is always free, and we have opportunities right now for comedy, true crime, scary, and paranormal podcasts. Just go to IndieDropIn.com to learn more.
Jen, how about you? And then we'll go to Michelle, who I think jumped up here because she probably has some input. And then we'll go to Greg. Jen, go ahead.
Well, I actually agree with Jason on that. I don't have a podcast, but I think it works either way on any single social media page, right? Or any page that you have. I do the same thing on Instagram. Like, I ask the people that are tuning in and that are engaging with my content, and I ask them directly. But there's one thing that is being old enough and kind of works somehow, is that when you do like this type of question quiz for people to find out what do they like and everything like that, it's easier for you to know what kind of audience are you trying to reach and the audience are you trying to engage with, right? So I kind of do the same thing that Jason does, just with my Instagram page.
Michelle, did you jump up here because you had some input?
I do. I always feel like I have a different take on marketing, but I always think about when people don't necessarily have the funds or for whatever reason to invest in marketing. And one of the things that I've done is I'm very intentional about the different projects that I say yes to that will grow my brand in general. It's not just the content of the podcast. It's like who knows what you're doing and what you're working on. So I'll give a couple of examples. I'm in the personal finance space. I actually make a point of saying I'm not a financial expert, but I'm an expert at financial conversations. And so one of the collaborations that I ended up working on last year was with Experian. And they found me because of my little show. They were going to work with a rapper on a project, and the rapper didn't work out. And so because I'd been working with them on something else, like in the freelance space, they were like, hey, would you be interested in doing this credit series? And I was like, yes. And so I ended up getting paid quite well and flown out and whatever. And now I have this content on their website that is out there in the world. And a lot of people have seen it and shown it and that kind of thing. Projects that I work on are picked with the intention of not only getting paid, but for backlinking to my website. Like, it's a whole ecosystem that I'm thinking of. So when people talk about like marketing their show, I feel like they should have a broader vision around what that looks like. I just finished wrapping up being a host for a podcast that's known in our space because the organization is the organization that hands out awards for people who create content in the personal finance space. So I was the host for this year for their podcast, and it went very well. So I do a lot of things like that also backlink to my show, to my website, and build my brand authority. And that attracts other opportunities to expand what I'm working on. So that's just something to consider. And also design projects that you would like to get paid for, so that people or that you would like people to notice without waiting for people to say yes to the project. Do you know what I mean? So this whole summer, all I'm doing is I produced a series on student loan forgiveness. It's top of mind. It's a very evergreen topic. I don't know what's happening with it, but it's been a really good piece of work. And I've gotten paid for it because I don't do these things for free anymore. It takes a lot of time to podcast at this point for me. So I find partners who make sense for projects that I develop. So right now I'm developing one on women and money, and I'm thinking, okay, which partners make the most sense? That one, have money, two, can backlink to me, can shout me out. Like, it's a whole process. So just think broadly as you consider marketing your project. By the way, I have more than one podcast. So I have one on digital marketing. I have one on Colorado. That one's really easy. And it's you connect with people in person and just think bigger. I think that's where people get tripped up. They think too small about what the project is.
So, Michelle, would you call your brand authority? Would that be otherwise described as influence?
I'm not falling for that.
So I'm glad that you brought up that you do multiple podcasts, because I have an opinion on multiple podcasts, and it's really not for the hobbyist. This opinion is really not for the hobbyist because you can do whatever you want. But I think it's very, very hard to have more than one podcast if you want it to be really successful. And for me, I launched my first podcast. I don't know, it was like 2016 or 2017. It wasn't really that long ago, but I launched it like a business. We had 2 full-time employees plus me part-time, and we still didn't get everything done. So just to think about someone who has a full-time job trying to market and write scripts or at least outlines and find content and just go through the whole process for more than one show seems insane. So I just caution everybody.
It's very difficult.
I just caution everybody, if you're going to go down that road, just know that, well, I think Jason or Jen said it, like, one is going to suffer, and you should figure out which one has the fish and, probably pivot to that one and do the other one for fun.
Dang,
Well,
Greg. I got 2 dailies and 3 weeklies. What are you trying?
But you don't have a
right now?
full-time job. You are
No, that's true.
You are a full-time content creator.
Tanner's a podcast savant, is what he is. I think
I
that's
don't
a
think
good
that's
way
the
to.
right word. I don't think that's the right word. That's a nice thing, isn't it?
Well,
he's an influencer.
He is an influencer. I would, say to that, Greg, I agree with you. And I think that, focusing on multiple podcasts is very difficult. Even attention deficit disorder world, and no offense to anyone who has official diagnosis, but I mean, I don't have an official diagnosis, and I cannot keep my focus on one thing for very long either. And I know that at the end of the day, when I have to make decisions about what I'm going to put my time into, it's almost always going to be, first, what do I love to do? And second, what is going to help me provide for my kids? And if those two things coincide, I know I got something good. And Winfluence for me is that. Digging Deeper wasn't so much. It was great while it lasted. It was a good experience. If we want to rekindle that at some point, I would certainly be open to it. But when I'm prioritizing and making decisions, it's those two things, man. If I really love doing it and I just am passionate about getting up and thinking about making that better every day, and it can help me, put food on the table and provide for my family, then that's what I'm going to focus on, and everything else can take a backseat.
This is a good example, because what you're describing is this like focus on a singular niche topic genre. Like you're passionate about influence marketing to the point where you eat, sleep, and drink it, and you can be an authority in the space, have an influence sphere, make great content, all those things. And I think in order to be successful in podcasting, like, you have to be at that point where you're living it and breathing it, because that's what translates to the audience.
Because I mean, you're talking about getting people to pay attention to you in a world where a million other things are begging them to pay attention to not you.
Exactly. And mediocrity is obvious when you're listening. Now, some people are just amazing and they just don't have to prep. But most of us, like me, have to do 8 hours worth of work for a half an hour podcast.
That's true. And I would say this, though, for those of you out there who are like, well, yeah, but I do 2 or 3 podcasts, or I have another concept I want to start. Don't kill those ideas just because we're saying in order to be really successful, you kind of have to narrow your focus. I would love more than anything to, sit in on 2 or 3 other podcasts a week and, be one of the panelists or one of the contributors. I don't necessarily want to take on the job of producing and marketing and promoting and an entire other podcast. But I think if I wanted to do, something that was about, I don't know, about parenting or about, my life in Kentucky or some of the other things that I'm interested in, even if I were invited to be, a co-host of a bourbon podcast, which is a topic that I feel like I know a little bit about and could be pretty entertaining with, I would love to do that. But I also have a radio pedigree and a background. So as long as I don't have to do a whole lot of prep work and a whole lot of post-production work, I can sit and talk about anything for a long time. And I would have a lot of fun doing that. So I'm not going to kill those ideas. I just can't take on the entire responsibility of them.
All right,
Hence
listen,
the power hour.
ladies and gentlemen, Jason Falls just gave us a perfectly wrapped up Exhibit A of the kind of co-host you don't want to get into bed with. He just wants to show up and talk.
No prep, just loaded with bourbon, ready to talk.
Hey, me drunk on a podcast would be really entertaining.
You're welcome to come on my other podcast whenever you want then, Jason.
Let's do it.
I will say this much though, because I'm sure maybe someone wants. I know it is the power hour after all, so maybe someone may have another question. But I just want to thank you guys for your time, all the information. I definitely have soaked in like a sponge, and I will say this much, as someone, like I said, I do have 2 podcasts, and for the hobbyists, it may be difficult. For me, I enjoy it despite all the work. I mean, it is.
Hey, come back off, Bromigo. Somebody tried to approve a request and accidentally muted everyone.
Oh, sorry. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, I definitely wouldn't be taking on the amount of projects I would go on if I didn't want to do stuff like this as a professional career. I mean, Jeff and I have spoken a couple of times about how this is the type of thing I actually do want to do. I have worked in radio. I've spent thousands of dollars in school for this sort of thing. So this is the type of stuff I definitely enjoy. And I do appreciate the fact that you guys were able to help answer my question to the best of your ability. So thank you.
If I could, before we move on to whatever the next topic is, and I'm sure Greg's going to tell us here in a second, for all of you that are thinking about like what Bromigo what's your first name, man? I know it and I can't.
It's
Matt. For any of you who are thinking you want to make this your full-time thing, I know there's a lot of anxiety around making that jump. I mean, it's a experience that I have most certainly had more than one time in my life. It is more possible than you think it is. So if people are telling you it's not possible, you're never going to get it done, so long as you're open to feedback, so long as you're open to taking risks, so long as you're committed, I mean, you can make it as a content creator, as a personality, as a whatever we call ourselves, influencers, God forbid. It is something you can really do. I mean, you just heard Greg make fun of me because I don't have a job, even though this is my job. And I think that's kind of the point he was making.
Job.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great comment. What I will say is kind of a rule in kind of all business is niches get riches. Right. So, I mean, you've seen those hair salons where they just blow dry your hair. I mean, you can niche down further than you could ever imagine in the world. And there's probably a market for it. I mean, there is such a thing as too niche, but I don't think you'll find it in podcasting because you can always kind of unlatch the belt, a loop. So, what you want to, if you want to try to, I'm a big proponent of kind of the middle class of podcaster. I think like Tanner, said, if you want to make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year podcasting, I think it's very doable. You can make a lot more, but I think if you're just trying to replace like a middle class job, I think you can do it. But you need to really focus on the niche, how you find value, and you got to eat, sleep, and drink that niche so that you can be more valuable in that niche than whoever's currently there, or at least as valuable. But,
you got to be willing to, I mean, if it's a business that you're building, you got to be willing to look at it like that and maybe expand to Jen's point earlier. You kind of have to broaden your, what are we saying? You include more things in your idea of what your business is exactly, because you're not just a podcaster, really.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And as much as I love doing Winfluence, the podcast, and I've been able to monetize it modestly. It funnels clients, consulting clients, to me for influence marketing. That's what it's there for, and it's a lead generation source. And it does not support me by itself, nor could it at this point. But hopefully, 5 years from now, maybe it's a lot bigger and a lot more well monetized, and maybe I can stop doing as much consulting work. But until then, it's always going to serve the purpose of feeding those other revenue streams that I've got out there.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like, if anybody in this room was just like moaned because Jason was like consulting clients, and you're like, I'm not a fucking consultancy. I can't get any consultant clients. I just had a conversation with a podcast I think is called like Pacific Northwest Hauntings or something. It's two girls host a podcast about what you think it probably is about. It's about that. And they were having a hard time monetizing. They couldn't come with ideas to like, oh, we have a Patreon. It's not working that well. It's not that much money. I said, why don't you start like a private once a month live ghost reading, and you sell a $30 t-shirt, and that t-shirt promotes the live reading and acts as their ticket into the readings for like a year. So they get in there. It's no work for you. It's like one thing a month you do for like an hour. You get to talk to all of your people. They all come into a live Zoom. You tell a couple of ghost stories, like sitting around a campfire, right? And then as that first year's up and that those t-shirt sales end, then it's a monthly fee or something. Like, think outside the box a little bit. Don't just limit yourself to Patreon or to like occasional swag purchases. Like, think about how you can leverage these things for ongoing income. Thanks, Jim.
Jim just wrote it down. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm paranormal.
Yeah. Just see, I'm paranormal. We're all a little paranoid, but think about how you can use these. Patreon's been, I think I remember Patreon when it came out like 2013, I want to say, or 12 when it came out. These things have been around for a while. They're not really getting any better. Think of new creative ways to leverage them. I think that membership programs and like private feeds, but thinking about them a little bit differently than just an ad-free feed. I think there's a lot of ways to make money. I got a little criticism for a tweet I made earlier today about like $50,000 a year in gross revenue is really easy to make. If you're willing to make $30,000 and eat noodles for a year, you can probably get there maybe even faster than a year. I mean, it's not that hard to make money. It's hard to make a lot of money, but it's not that hard to make probably what you make at your day job.
Well, and
You got to have a good show first, though.
Yeah. You
Sorry,
have to
Jason.
have a good show.
Yeah, 100%.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Definitely have to have a good show. And Tanner, let me add to that. Consulting is just kind of part of what I do. And I would say that that's, one revenue stream. If you don't consider yourself a consultant, here's something that I think a lot of podcasters maybe don't consider. And one of the other revenue streams that I have is speaking at conferences. And maybe you have stage fright and you don't want to get up and speak, but you do have the ability to broadcast. If you're a podcaster, you're a broadcaster. And so you could MC an award show. You could, be the host of a conference or an event, especially in your niche. If for the young ladies that do the paranormal haunting podcast, there are conventions, there are events, there are things that they could get involved with as broadcasters, as hosts, as MCs, and that can be a way to monetize what you do too. So again, just think about what value you can bring to your audience and or other businesses in your niche, and that can help open up some revenue streams as well.
Yeah. Okay. So 80s. Oh, Ed, what's up, Ed? I'm being asked to queue you up for your question. Go right ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just starting to walk my dogs. I thought we were going to be talking about drunken podcasting, and so I was going to chime in on that, but we've long since passed that, so I really don't have anything.
Well,
But
thanks for an amazing final question, Ed,
He drank
of the
all
night.
this liquor for no reason.
Oh my God.
Love it.
All right. Well, does anybody have any final questions? Because we are at 10:01 Eastern time, and Jeff is going to turn into a pumpkin if we don't hang this thing up soon.
I think Jeff might be asleep. Michelle,
I'm not asleep.
Okay,
I'm here.
Michelle, you did come on for a second there off mic just before I called to Ed. Did you want to add something?
No, I don't have anything to add other than if you love talking about 80s movies and you love to drink tequila or scotch, look me up, because I do those things before I broadcast every week myself.
I
Not you,
wanted
Ed.
to say that there are so many freaking ways you can monetize. Ironically, I just did MC an event last weekend. It was a virtual event. I get paid to freelance, brand collaborations. Like, there's just so many ways to make money podcasting. I think it's just being clear what works for you, being open to what's possible. Affiliate marketing. I do think you need a website though, but there's just, it's like the limit is your imagination, basically, because we're in a creative space. So that's something to think about, and being bold enough to connect with other people when you have a cool idea that you would like to bring to life and get paid for.
Yeah, you kind of got to get this. I know Gary Vee's a little, well, I guess Gary Vee's a little bit like me, or vice versa. We're a little aggressive unnecessarily. You have to kind of get this fuck whether or not you think I can do this attitude when people, kind of tell you you're not going to be able to make a living with your podcast, or that's a stupid idea. Like, I imagine anybody who's ever accomplished anything in history was told by so many fucking people that it was never going to work. Like the Wright brothers were like, we're going to fly like birds. And people were like, what the fuck are you going to do? You're not going to do that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And that's a really extreme example, but it happens all the time. Gary Vee talks about how your parents especially will hold you back because they love you, they care about you, they don't want to see you fail, and so they coddle you. You got to love those people, especially your parents, I guess. I don't have that relationship with my parents. I wonder why. But you have to have those people in your life. You have to love and respect them, but you also have to have enough strength to be like, hey, fuck you, mom and dad, and all my friends who don't want me to get hurt. I want to risk getting hurt because I want to fucking do something. I don't want to get off my soapbox now.
Amen.
Wow. No, Jason, do you have something to throw in there?
No, I was
Tanner's
just
soapbox?
I was amening Tanner's soapbox. That's all. Amen.
Oh, don't encourage him. You can't encourage him.
I'm a piece of shit, guys. Nobody likes me. It's my only moment to shine.
I like you, Tanner.
I did
Only us.
I
All
did
your
forget
friends
to
are here.
mention in the beginning, did you guys see that feature is active down there where you can comment and chat during the space?
We should have
Remind me to-
done that. You're
Yeah,
right.
remind me to bring that up next week. But anyways, we'll move on to the closing thoughts here. I've certainly, although I'm losing my voice, have enjoyed this discussion. I know you just kind of had a closing thought there, Tanner, but do you have anything else?
No, I just, believe in yourself. I know that's kind of cliche, but expand your horizons. Think you're more than a podcaster. Your podcast is kind of like a handshake that introduces you to a whole ton of potential and opportunity. And if you look at it that way and you're willing to do more than just the podcast, and I'm not belittling people who just want to do a podcast, but if you're willing to do more than that, you can find just like Michelle said, my fellow Coloradan, who is probably sweating her ass off today as badly as I was. It's like 98 here today. It was ridiculous, Michelle. What the hell's going on? The world's ending. If you're willing to do that, I mean, you can really make your own life. You can make it the way you want it, and I love seeing people do that. It's one of the reasons I show up on Twitter and talk shit to everybody.
Mr. Mallard, your closing thoughts.
My closing thought is I just want to thank Jason and Jen and Michelle for the information tonight, and it sounds like you just got to work hard and show up every day.
Beautiful. Jay, your closing thoughts, and you were able to provide great information during this space, so thank you. No, okay, there you are.
I'm sorry. It's my kid. He's like talking to me right now. It's that time. No, I think this, as you know, this is a great conversation, and I think I have a million questions for Jason. So many things that we can actually talk about. But this was great, and I really hope everyone got something from my expertise, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
See, right there's a good example. Either Jason just got a consulting client or Jen did.
Michelle, anything else you want to throw on? My favorite Jackson. Speaking of Jackson, Dave Jackson had something come up, so we apologize for jumping out. Michelle's not speaking up, so we'll move on.
No, I'm good.
Well, you sounded crazy there. It's like demonic for a second. Greg, your closing thoughts.
I really appreciate everyone coming to the space. I learned so much, and I really do think that your influence in a given category has a direct relationship to your monetization ability. So work on that, right? Michelle gave some tips. Jason gave some tips. Jen gave some tips. Soak it in. and go out there and make some money. I believe in you.
Beautiful. Jason, the guest of the hour, your closing thoughts.
I really appreciate you guys having me, and love the conversation, all the smarts that was brought to the table here tonight. It was great to hear and great to see. And Greg almost kind of stole my thunder there, because my closing thought is, you all have influence over a certain number of people, whether it's your listeners, whether it's your community, your family, your friends. Just keep nurturing that, and because it's valuable, whether or not you wind up making money from that influence or not, or just being the person who gives good advice or good thoughts on what keep working at it. It's very rewarding in the end.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to take a second to thank everybody that's listening and the people that continue to listen every week. We hope that you come back next week and every other Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern for Podcasting Power Hour. I think that the message delivered tonight is keep being you, keep being great, and don't litter.
Definitely that one. Don't litter.
You
It's too
bastards.
hot in Colorado for Tanner. Quit throwing your shit out the window.
Yeah.
I don't get a final thought.
Ed, you already plugged yourself, Ed. What more do you want, man?
Thank you for listening to the Podcasting Power Hour. Everyone is free to participate on Twitter Spaces every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. To join, just follow Jeff at podcast_father or Greg at Indie Drop-In. If you found this podcast helpful, go into your podcast app and write a quick review. Other podcasters will see it and know this show is worth listening to. Also, I'll put a few links in the show notes for ways you can support the show. I think by now you know we love our coffee. Have a great week.
I was just going to say to the hobbyists who are on the fence about moving on to the next level, just do it, man. Tanner's kicked my ass a number of times over the last several months. Ever since I bought my URL for the podcast, even though I haven't published a new show in 2.5 weeks, the numbers for the show keep going up. I'm creating daily content for my website, and the views are going up. So just as they say, shit or get off the pot. So I want to thank Tanner for kicking me in the ass enough times to start moving towards the next level.
All I heard there was Tanner was an ass. That's all I heard.
So, yeah, some people need a hug to get started, and other people need somebody to yell at them. I'm the yeller. Come to me if you want to yelling, and go to Jim if you want a hug, a big supernatural hug.
Ed, this
Tanner is the
podcast already
world's-
ended. None of this will
Okay.
make the final
Well,
cut, but nevertheless.
Of course not.
I'm chopping this right out.
Okay, babyface to kayfabe. I don't like this new Jeff. Your brother's becoming my favorite Townsend.
Well, I'm just being honest with you because Greg's the one that edits it, and I know he will cut this shit out. He will hack and hack.
All right.
I will not.
Guys, I'm out.
Greg's
Peace.
like the only person in the room who doesn't follow me, so
See
I'm
ya.
not too worried about what he does.
There you go. I'm not into 80s movies, man. I'm just
He's
kidding.
into-
I'm
he's
totally
into
into
the-
80s movies.
His age is more into 50s movies.
I didn't know they made movies in the 1850s.
I just rectified that issue. So if you start complaining again, I will unfollow you. Though.
I was gonna say Greg's favorite movies are the ones that didn't have sound.
Mm.
Yeah, because I add my own sound in the theater, so it's quite fun.
Yeah, Greg doesn't go to theaters. That would require him to put on pants.
Well, yeah, I have one in my house, so why would I go anywhere?
Oh,
That's
here
why
we
he
go
goes to
again.
the drive-in. No pants required.
There's no drive-ins in East St. Louis anymore.
Do I have my camera on? What is going on?
Hey Jeff,
All
all
right.
serious. Feel better, bud.
All right, thanks, and I appreciate everybody coming in. See you next Monday.
Nice. See ya.
See ya. Bye-bye.